So thank you very much. Round two, we will try again, and hopefully this one will go a little bit more smoothly. And I hope we have an audience. So important as the STEM syllabus and agenda may be, it should still be viewed through the lens of a place within a larger picture. And if we can shape the sharing of our own subject based on a wider understanding of the world around us, then we create a richer, a more inclusive and a more sustainable experience for the betterment of society as a whole. Social sciences are an integral part of the STEM portfolio and, to a greater or lesser extent, can help us to integrate our subject for today into a more holistic education process. To help us all connect and to focus on those things that are important to us today, I've prepared a Mentimeter element. So hopefully there are enough people watching that can open a new tab on their device in the next few minutes, let's say in the next 30 minutes. And if you please visit www.menti.com and input the code 71627117, then you can fill in your answers. I'm looking to create an understanding of what images the word river brings to mind in each of you. Over the next 30 minutes or so, you'll all help to build a word cloud based on the relative importance of those words to all of us here today. And then in my final session, I'll share the feedback as a graphic at the start of that session, and it will give us some impression of how important rivers are to each of us who are viewing. And also in the final session, I'll have another Mentimeter poll, which will allow you all to help Marcia Trust with the project we have running. But my personal experience comes through working on Marcia fish. You'll know them as Ikan Kela. They're known to us as the true Marcias, and they're members of the genus Tor. There's also another closely related genus called Neolisacylus, and you in Malaysia and Indonesia call them Ikan Tengas. They're commonly known as the lesser Marcias. Of all of these countries, these 15 range countries, I've looked at rivers and fish in 7 of these countries. And in 4 of those in particular, India is the one where I have most experience, but also Thailand, Indonesia and Malaysia. I've looked very carefully at how local communities work with and often are the first point of protection for rivers and fish. Additionally, I have contact with scientists who are working on various elements of taxonomy, genetics, population, distribution, habitat range, socioeconomic issues, as well as threats to the fish and to the rivers and the people who depend upon them in every one of these range countries apart from Afghanistan and Laos. Sharing knowledge between those countries, either as a result of scientific study or as part of educational awareness, is a key remit to the work of Marcia Trust. So why Marcia? Well, with a preference for well-oxygenated, clean, fast-flowing rivers, Marcia are an ideal indicator of river health. That's not to say that they cannot adapt to slightly less favourable habitat, and indeed they appear to do well in reservoir impoundments. Although, as studies on the Tembak River of Terengganu State have shown, the Marcias survive, they do not thrive. And the loss of approximately 75% of fish species from Tasik, Kenya, compared to the free-flowing river stretches that feed the lake, demonstrates that building a dam does have a significant impact on overall biodiversity. I was involved in the collection of fish during the Tenaga Nasional Berhad pre-dam operation on Tembak River, and I've worked closely with the lead scientist on the study, Dr. Sam Walton, who was working for University Malaysia Terengganu when he was looking at the differences between the fish diversity of the lake and the fish diversity of the rivers that fed into the lake. And that's how I came by this knowledge. Nevertheless, Marcia can be seen as an umbrella species, which is slightly different from a flagship species. A flagship is one that serves as an easily identifiable image for public consumption. It's often been said that although tigers are the flagship of the forest, they would be nothing without the bees. So an umbrella species is one for which, if habitat conditions are suitable for it to thrive, many other species will also do well. As an apex predator and an animal that uses mixed habitat features, including fast broken water for hunting, slower pools for resting, and side streams for breeding, and also being a shaper of habitat through seed dispersal and moving gravel when spawning, Marcia are definitely a species with a big impact on the river ecosystem. Without them, we can see that the river is in trouble. This chart from WWF's Living Planet report of 2020 is troubling and, I hope, gives a very clear message. The questions for us here today are, why does this matter? And what can we, as a cohort of STEM teachers and educators, do to attempt to change this dangerous curve? An obvious place to start is by saying that many of the animals represented here live below the water, so they're easily ignored or forgotten. And indeed, the most recent report from WWF, and one in which Marcia Trust played a role, is called Forgotten Fishes. Ask many people about fish and they automatically think sea fish. And in sea fish, they include crustacea and mollusks. Red snapper, sea bass, squid, they're probably the most readily recognised amongst the general public if we ask, what do you think of when we say fish? But here are a few key takeaways from the Forgotten Fishes report. That 51% of all fishes are found in fresh water. And those fishes make up around 25% of all vertebrate life on the planet. And approximately 1/3 of those are currently considered to be under imminent threat of extinction. And we even know, just from Marcia, that beyond the 16 current valid species of Tor genus, there are probably at least another 6 or 7 fish that require new description. And I know that just from viewing photos of those fish without field study. And in Western India alone, tens of new freshwater fish species have been described just in the last 5 years. It's also worth noting that of the 16 true valid marcias, half are red listed data deficient by the IUCN because they cannot be accurately identified and population levels therefore cannot be determined. This lack of knowledge about what lives in rivers, especially the rich biodiverse rivers of subtropical and tropical countries, is a part of the threat. It's all too easy to ignore what we don't understand. Yet freshwater fish drive incredible industry. Worldwide, $100 billion every year is spent on recreational angling, or memanching in Bahasa Malay. The value of the ornamental home aquarium trade is around $30 billion every year. And many of the sought after fish targeted by those interested in home aquaria are those same subtropical and tropical fish of the rivers. And this scale of monetary importance doesn't even take into account communities and individuals who catch fish for sale or for subsistence. So how are we going to get that required knowledge? Well, that's down to you and me to inspire future generations to research and to share the information and for more people to become aware. And notice I haven't even mentioned freshwater plants in here. That's a whole other field. During my classroom teaching days, I was told to not read everything on a PowerPoint slide, as this insults the intelligence of the viewer or the audience. However, I appreciate that this slide is a bit tricky to see in detail. So I'll add some information directly from it and encourage you to put FAO, Importance of Biodiversity, into Google. And from there, you will easily find the report and you can make your own conclusions and use this in your own education if you need to. So bees get a lot of media coverage, quite rightly, given how important they are for food production and their almost unrivaled role in pollination of wild and commercial plants. But another aspect of insects that is of key interest in Malaysia, Indonesia, and other countries of the Marcia range is that of disease control. Zoonotic diseases have been high priority over the last year, but let us consider now two diseases that are increasing in prevalence, mainly due to our obsession with trying to control water. I'm talking about malaria and dengue fever. The natural predators of both the larval and the airborne phases of mosquitoes are dragonflies, but alongside are also fish and amphibians. These are all creatures that suffer losses when we change river flow regimes. And at the same time, when we change those river flow regimes, we create ideal breeding conditions for those disease vectors. You'll hear shortly about deforestation. And here on this slide, you can see a humble earthworm, nature's little, or sometimes not so little, soil rotivator, and part of the energy recycling miracle that includes lots of dead things, without which most life on Earth would paradoxically end. So if we clear riverbanks in a bid to move water faster, then we also remove the topsoil that is the natural habitat of those humble earthworms. Yet the farmer needs to pump water onto his and her fields, and if we've removed the vegetation surrounding a river, the water doesn't have a chance to slow and percolate and recharge the groundwater. So we force the farmer to have to bring water from other places. Things like this are lessons that we need to learn, that everything is connected, we're part of the same system, and we should spend more time looking at the complexity, the interactions, the interconnections, and to move towards a holistic way of looking at ecosystems and ecotones, river basins, countries, land masses, and most of all, the way we depend upon these connections. As I said, shortly we'll be taking more detailed looks at the water cycle and how water is connected to the landscape. But for now, I'm going to touch on a single aspect, but one that is of huge significance for river inhabitants, but also for those who would attempt to engineer rivers for whatever reason. Connectivity is about the spatial links between parts of a river basin. And these are more or less important depending on where you are positioned in the basin. Your requirements to move within and throughout the basin, and how these things are affected by seasonal flow fluctuations. It's all connectivity. On the right-hand side of the screen, the black diagonal arrow represents longitudinal connectivity. The horizontal grey arrow shows lateral connectivity, and the vertical grey arrow shows vertical connectivity. The relative size of the arrows in the diagram gives an approximation of the importance of each, depending on where in the river basin we look. Claire will be shortly giving some specific representations of some of the natural hydrological processes. So I will simply say that physical, chemical, and biological processes all depend upon connectivity. Disruption of any one of those has an inevitable effect upon the others. Recently, I and my colleagues have spent a lot of time discussing fish passes with dam engineers who would like me and others to say, yes, let the Marcia pass and our dam is suddenly a green project. However, if we don't consider the movements of smaller fish, especially those that cannot jump, and if we also don't consider that we're cutting sediment transportation, if we stop the downstream drift of insect larvae, if we block the upstream movement of large predators like crocodiles, if we release water in unseasonal patterns, this will destroy the birds' eggs of those which nest in sand. So altogether, many of the support mechanisms needed by Marcia will be lost if we disrupt any of these elements of connectivity. I'll finish with a quick look at a background to freshwater ecosystems and say that it's relatively easy to bring this into education. This little diagram I've used for younger children, and it's a great way to start understanding the principles that affect relationships within ecosystems and how food webs work. So what are ecosystems and why are they important? Well, simply, they're a mutual benefit in society. But also, as we've seen within these freshwater ecosystems, they're still relatively less well understood compared to tropical forests, or even to some extent compared to oceans. For those who don't understand the terminology, ecotones are the spaces between ecosystems, many of which are just as important and just as rich in biodiversity. So a river can be an ecosystem and a forest can be a separate ecosystem. And the riparian plants and trees may be part of an ecotone. Some of the animals that live in and on the river require access to the forest through the ecotone. For example, there are fish that hunt and others that lay eggs on the leaves of overhanging trees. Amphibians may bathe in and spend most of their lives in the river, yet climb a tree to lay their eggs safely away from the fish and the insect larvae that would predate on them. Kingfishers and kites swoop from branches to lift a fish towards a waiting chick in the nest. And the bones that they discard become a treat for the ants and beetles that scurry on the forest floor. And when they've finished their work at breaking down the bones, fungi will take over the process and help the remains move back into being a source of calcium and other minerals that is the energy cycle within a forest, within the ecosystem. It's a magical system, and it's one that we attempt to mimic in its complexity, yet we fall far short despite some ingenious leaps in our knowledge. So let us teach those who would follow in our footsteps to move towards an appreciation of the wonder of the networks in and around what is ultimately one of the essential compounds without which our chemical, biological, physical and mechanical marvel, the human body, cannot operate. Together, let us celebrate H2O.
The river and why and how it is important to all of us. Next, I would like to invite Claire to say more about the river from another perspective. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Hello there, everybody. I would like to talk to you today about the role of practical hands-on experience when learning about river systems and how STEM can be facilitated in your classrooms with your group of young people through learning about rivers. So I want to make it real for you. First, a little about myself. I've taught geography at secondary level for over a decade. I spent my early 20s as a river habitat surveyor in the UK, and I am the current Marseille Trust Volunteer Education Advisor. I have spent time in the past overseas on education projects involving sea turtles and river conservation, and I'm really passionate about empowering young people to learn more about their planet and the challenges that it faces. So as you can see from the quote on this first slide, Albert Einstein said, "Information is not knowledge. The only source of knowledge is experience. You need experience to gain wisdom." By gaining experience of whatever it is we are studying, we are more likely to commit the information to long-term memory, to really learn it. By visiting a river after learning about rivers in the classroom, or by creating a model of a river system, or analysing data collected on water chemistry, then students are more likely to learn and recall the information because they are applying their knowledge. So as teachers or educators, we've got an incredible resource to draw upon, and it's the curious minds of the children that we teach. Rivers are a part of all of our lives in some way, be it a small stream, a large river, or a temporary rivulet of water that runs through the street after some heavy rainfall. Children are fascinated by the flow of water, and they enjoy playing in or near watercourses, sometimes for long periods of time. If we can harness this natural curiosity from young people, then we have engaged them. And when we have engagement, when we have their interest, then the desire to learn naturally follows. Children like to ask questions. They have an intrinsic desire within them to understand the world around them. And if we listen, we can harness this to our advantage as teachers. So one way that we could begin to harness this natural curiosity at whatever age young people, even up to adults, is before launching into a module or a lesson on rivers, we could take the time and the opportunity to allow students to ask questions and share with us invested in getting to the answers. If we can go one step further and we could tie this learning in the classroom to a real river, one that they had some familiarity with, then the learning is real. And when the learning is real, then the learning is more likely to stick and the learners are more likely to stay engaged and curious. So we've got a lovely picture here of Steve with some young people in a river. And I would ask you, how accessible is your nearest river? It might not quite be like the river shown here. It could be a small, tiny trickle. It could be a rocky, wild torrent, or it could be a smooth, wide channel. But whatever its characteristics, there will be scope in visiting with young people. There's a lot to be gained from being there with young people on the bank of a river or in the channel itself, taking in the sights, the smells and the sounds, observing the locality, talking about where the river comes from and where it is going, giving time and space for awe and wonder. That awe might be positive, it might be being in awe and wonder at the beauty and the power of the river in front of you. Or it might lead to more negative emotions of awe. It may be at the lack of life in the river below you or in the high levels of pollution flowing by. Both are important. Although perhaps not meeting a curriculum learning objective in acquiring knowledge, making space and time for this appreciation of the natural world is important in generating the curiosity, readying learners for the experience and knowledge that will follow. One simple activity to do on the banks of a river may be to engage students in a game of what if. Ask questions, throw them out there. What if thinking creates rich discussion at any age and encourages critical thinking, a skill that all students will need in the future. You could ask the questions such as, what if a dam was constructed upstream or downstream of this point? Perhaps the point shown here in the picture. What if a dye factory opened right there? What if a flood surged down the river and through this village? What if the rubbish was cleaned out of the water for good? What would that mean? This could also be played, if you cannot get to a real river, using photographs and other stimuli like that in the classroom. And if there are just too many barriers to getting out to a real river, and put the powers of technology to work. Google Earth is amazing. I'm sure you'll all agree with that. It allows rivers to be followed from source to mouth, and Google Street View lets us visit areas with a 360-degree view. Virtual fieldwork has seen a surge in these COVID times when people have not been able to get out in the field, and there is much information and support available online. You can do a quick Google of virtual fieldwork and there will be many results that come up to you. And I'd really recommend looking at the Royal Geographical Society's website for ideas if you consider this to be something you may be able to use in your classroom. So as STEM teachers, we thought it useful, hopefully, and appropriate to focus in on how you could use rivers when teaching and delivering STEM subjects in schools. So gaining a wide appreciation of river systems is important, and those reasons are going to be set out in other talks today and have also been set out this morning in Steve's talk. Rivers lend themselves to STEM subjects beautifully, from primary school age and beyond. River dams, for example, are huge examples of engineering projects. They change the characteristics of the river drastically, having massive implications for biodiversity and human populations upstream and downstream of the dam site. You could investigate these by a site visit, or you could perhaps use Google Earth to discover upstream and downstream impacts of a dam, ideally within Malaysia itself. And the dam in the picture is the dam under construction, which Steve mentioned earlier, the Tembak River Dam. Bridges too are a feat of engineering, as are boats. Both of these are worthy of investigation within a river study. Two, biodegradable boats could be built out of natural materials and tested on rivers, or in small scale bridges could be designed, built and compared, tested for strength. Now, studies on the movement of water within a river catchment, which I believe will be spoken about later, the drainage basin hydrological cycle. The movement of water within that cycle affects the likelihood of a river flooding. And we can bring this drainage basin or part of this drainage basin cycle to life by observing and quantifying, if you wanted to, the results of pouring water over different surfaces. To do this, you could pour water over, or you could ask students to choose different ground in their kind of school locality, take some water and pour it over different types of ground and see what effects they find. They could use vegetated ground, flat ground, sloped ground, concrete or tarmac. By directly experiencing the effect of these surfaces on surface runoff or infiltration, whether the water moves down through the ground, links can be made to the likelihood of river flooding, and you can also discuss what might happen if there were changes within the drainage basin itself. I've done this myself, so simple, doesn't take a lot of time, and I've done it myself over a period of years teaching geography, and I found that this simple experiment really helps students to grasp, interpret and predict the idea of river hydrographs shown in the picture at the bottom, which can be a really kind of difficult and complex concept for some students to grasp. Rivers also offer an opportunity to collect and manipulate lots of data in investigations that apply the scientific method shown here. So the scientific method begins with asking questions. And one example of a frequently asked question in the study of rivers at secondary geography level here in the UK is, how and why does river velocity or speed change downstream? Data collection in this case would involve measuring channel width, and you can see in the middle picture there are some students out in the field measuring some of these channel characteristics, wetted perimeter, channel depth and river velocity. And there's very little required for an investigation in terms of equipment. You'd need a measuring tape, some willing students, a suitable stretch of river, a long stick or ruler to measure depth, a stopwatch, and an object that floats. Methodologies can be found easily online. And then you could use spreadsheets and technology, if available, to use and graph the data. So again, meeting a lot of the different STEM subjects. A more qualitative question sometimes asked is, how is the water in our river used by the town? And these qualitative questions can too follow the scientific method. They could involve the use of questionnaires to collect data and photographs to collect evidence. Another frequent type of fieldwork that is a big winner with students and with teachers and with adults as well is the investigation into what lies in rivers. So by exploring biodiversity, we can then extend studies in the classroom further into learning about life cycles, food chains, and food webs. You can see in the picture here, these are examples of some macroinvertebrates, okay, or insects of the river. And they are bioindicators. In other words, they're biological detection devices that signal the quality of the water. And they indicate patterns of water quality, whereas chemical data on its own does not. And just as Adrian said there on the slide, chemical study shows a snapshot in time, and biological study shows long-term effects on river health. Children and adults, in my experience, they love to discover the life residing in the river, especially this hidden life. It's fascinating and a memorable experience for all. To collect samples such as these of invertebrates, it's a very straightforward technique should you have an accessible river and a net. You just stand upstream of the net, you kick the sediment at the bottom, the flow of water will push whatever rises from the sediment through the net, and you will catch the invertebrates there. And you can then tip them out into a tray with a little water in it, and you can marvel at what you find. Field identification guides are useful too, if there are any available. But if not, then you could perhaps take photos and try an internet search back in the classroom to find an identification. But failing that, if identification is not possible, then just allowing the children to look at and explore and discover the life that's found in a river and an appreciation for the weird and wonderful biodiversity that's will have been gained. And discoveries can be linked to food chains involving the larger animals of the river, such as fish. So another way to explore river systems is through the use of models. In 2018, the Malaysia Trust secured an M-River2 river modelling table from Little River Research and Design in the USA for use in schools in India. The Malaysia Trust wanted to take the river to the schools because this allowed for the involvement of many children across all ages and across a diverse range of schools within Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. This M-River2 table simulates a real river system. Water flows through the model by use of a pump connected to the table, which is submerged within a bucket of water. So no mains water connection is necessary. And power for the pump can be supplied by an external battery. So it's very self-contained. The media or sediment that's used is made of recycled ground plastic, and it comes in different grades or sizes. And this means that the media can demonstrate river behaviour and channel morphology with amazing accuracy in the space and timescales of the river model. So you can use these basically to simulate a real river, and we were building meanders within them, and we were able to modify the channel and show what would happen. And in some places they've also managed to simulate deltas as well within these tables. During our school visits, we used the table to explore river geomorphologies such as the formation of meanders, erosion and deposition. We also focused on the impact of human activity by modelling how activities upstream have impacts downstream, and that was one of the main messages we wanted to get across. For example, how factory or sewage effluent release in one part of the river travels downstream and how it can concentrate in slack or backwaters. And for that, we use the dyes. You can see one of the pots that we squeezed into the water on the water table there. Together with the students, we also explored how modifications to the riverbanks or channel would impact on other parts of the river. By, for example, increasing erosion downstream of bank defences, or in the case of sand mining or dredging, causing headward erosion back upstream of the dredging site, resulting in a change of channel characteristics both up and downstream, including bank instability. We also simulated the impact of damming the river. I'm going to play you a video. It's just a short clip of our time at the Frank Anthony Public School, but I'm going to mute the volume because the volume is not very good quality, unfortunately. I'm going to talk over it. So this video was recorded during our visit to the Frank Anthony School in Bangalore. Introducing and using the river table with students, it was a massive, joyful experience. It really was, on each day that we used it. Our visit to this school involved hundreds of children, quite literally. I think it was between 400 and 600 in one go, in one sitting. So this did limit their hands-on involvement. So you can see they're not really getting their hands stuck in as we would like them to. But that's because we were so constrained with time. But I think that you can see from their faces that they're engaged and interested. And despite the limited time that they got to spend at the table, this experience is very likely to bring theoretical studies alive in the classroom. We found that small group sizes have the most impact, as the young people were able to be hands-on with the table. They could ask questions and manipulate the river table themselves. And this type of direct learning experience is incredibly powerful. There are a wealth of STEM learning opportunities available through the river table for all levels of students, from preschool or kindergarten all the way to university students. And their website, Little River's website, offers much information on the possibility of what can be achieved with the river tables if you're interested. I think Steve's going to say a little about that later. So this is my final slide, and I wanted to end with this slide, the power of play, because I wanted to emphasise the power of hands-on practical experience and discovery, whether this be in the classroom, the small grounds, or out at an actual river itself. Students can be challenged to do things such as build model of bridges, make water filters. They can make mistakes along the way and they can learn to correct them, building their critical thinking skills. In the absence of a flashy bit of kit, such as a water table, students can make their own simple model using a tin tray like the one shown in the corner down there, and using some water and sand. Students can also foster their cooperation skills, perhaps by working together to construct the model of a river, perhaps their local one. And the photographs shown here are from the Nepal River Conference, where more mature students worked with younger children from the village to build a full-scale model of their local river using polystyrene tiles. And I think you can see how detailed that is. The experiences that children have with rivers will build their knowledge and understanding, and it will also foster a respect for the essential role they play in our environment and lives. So I'm going to leave you with a quote. Only if we understand will we care. Only if we care will we help. And only if we help shall all be saved. And that's a quote by Jane Goodall. I hope that you found that interesting, and I hope that in some way you're able to use that within the classroom itself. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Claire, for that awesome, amazing presentation. I love the visuals of how the students were introduced to the river and how it flows from one to the other. Start my video. Okay. Okay, so next we would like to call, who's next? Huh?
Okay, I thought that,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Hi, Claire. While waiting for Dr. Usham, I'm very impressed with your presentation when you incorporate STEM into your learning teachings. It's very nice.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next we pass the button to Dr. Usham.
Dr. Usam. Dr. Usam, you would like to start?
Can Mr. Azne start first?
Or you want, Encik Azne, yeah, please. If you want to be ahead of Dr. Usam, this is the time.
I think Datuk is pulling rank here. Okay, let me get to my screen here.
So tea time, we miss tea time, Mr. Steve. Mana ni? Dia jadi kan. Jadi auto setup. Mr. Azne, are you not ready?
I'm trying to get my presentation on, yeah.
Okay.
Is it there? Can you see my PowerPoint?
No.
Oops.
We need to click it. Sabah Tagal.
Yes.
We need to click it. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Can, huh? Okay. Okay, thank you so much for including me in this webinar. Very quick intro about myself. Super quick because we've lost a bit of time because of the technical problem. Yeah. My name is Azne, and first and foremost, I'm a fisherman. Not just a fisherman, but a pretty crazy one as well. I've been fishing since I was small, and one of my bosses used to call me a full-time fisherman and part-time engineer. That's how crazy I am. Yeah. But after a long while of fishing, me and my friends, we sat down one day over teh tarik, and after some prolonged discussion, we came to the conclusion that we've been enjoying the rivers, catching fish and releasing most of them, by the way. But maybe it's time to give something back, yeah, to something that has given us joy for so many years. So a small group of us formed this little NGO called Kelah Association of Malaysia, or KAGUM for short. We've been around for about 15 years or so, and we've been doing some programs around the country. Essentially, KAGUM's main aim is to help the nation conserve the rivers and the fishes, yeah, Malaysian fishes. So we thought it's a noble objective, yeah, and we are willing to help anybody who's also involved in trying to conserve the rivers. Yeah. So that's me. Just as an addition, for this particular audience, I'm also the YDP of a particular PIBG of a school in KL. So we got something in common, yeah, with most of the audience who I understand are educators and teachers. Yeah? Which leads me to the point of our customers, which are the students and the kids. Yeah. From our little experience working with them and doing things like river cleanups, which later I will present to you as well. Yeah, we find that kids or students or the youth are more willing to change their behavior. Yeah? When we want to impart change on anything, and in our case, change in environment conservation, yeah, care for the environment, nothing changes until the humans change their behavior. And in terms of changing behavior, it's the kids who will change their behavior first. What I'm trying to say is we focus on the kids will be the role models for the rest of the citizens. Yeah, that's through my own personal experience. So we are trying to do something noble here. Yeah, okay. Go on with my little presentation. This is about Tagals, which is a community-based river conservation program that has been implemented, especially in the state of Sabah. Yeah, and I'm going to present to you one particular region in Sabah called Kulu. There's a valley there called Kulu. Closest town is Tamparuli. Yeah, and this is a story about their river conservation programs, what happened and what lessons we can learn from that. Okay, Sabah is an enchanting land for those of you who have visited the state. Yeah, beautiful Mount Kinabalu. By the way, that's my own picture. Yeah, great one. And the interior of Sabah is cooled basically by Mount Kinabalu because it's highlands. Yeah, and there are many remote villages there, very picturesque, still dependent on the river for their use, for irrigation, for agriculture, and also for household use. Yeah. Many of those villages do not even have a pipe water, as it were. Yeah, and so they are dependent on the rivers. Yeah. However, decades ago, many of those rivers were depleted of fish, and fish is an indicator of the health of the river. Yeah, many of the rivers were silted up because there was extensive amount of logging. Yeah. Clearing of the jungles, and you know how it is in Malaysia, it never rains but it pours. Yeah, when the rains come down, all the silt, all the earth get washed into the river, and that's it. I have seen rivers that used to be 30, 40, 50 feet deep, yeah, overnight, you know, get totally silted up, you can walk across it. It's that bad. Yeah. So uncontrolled logging and agriculture is a major concern. Yeah. And then, of course, usage of chemical fertilizers, insecticides, and all that, fungicides, yeah, kill off the fish. Yeah, they do not just kill off the fish, but they kill off the food pyramid of which the fish is at the top. Yeah, all the insect larvae, the ones that's shown by Claire just now, the nymphs and all that, they all die off, and of course, the fish will die off because the fish are dependent on those things. Yeah, and of course, overfishing. I believe Asians are the greatest experts at catching fish. They use all sorts of methods. Yeah, bombs, poisons, nets, you name it, electricity. Yeah, many of these rivers are depleted of fish. Yeah, they are not totally decimated, but they are very depleted. I'll tell you later. Yeah. Now, about 3 decades ago, yeah, a few individuals around Sabah, and especially in the Kulu area, started thinking about this predicament of the river. And they proposed this simple idea of leaving the river to its own devices. Let the river self-heal. As long as we do 2 things, don't pollute the river and don't catch the fish. Yeah. And I met one of them, a guy by the name of Vitalis Galason, nice name. He comes from this village called Noturus, not very far from Kota Kinabalu, not very far from KK. And he has had no education in his life, never went to school. But he came up with the idea of conserving the river and reviving the river. It took him more than a year to convince the other villages, but finally they started it. Yeah, they started it. Yeah. They tried it, and the fishes came back. 6 months down the road, they could see small marcia, small kala. In Sabah, they are called pelian. Small fishes started coming back, and they started feeding the fish with leftover food like rice and whatnot. Yeah, and when they have money, they buy some fish pellets and they give it to the fish. Yeah. Now, couple of decades down the road, if you go to the village of Vitalis Galason, which is Notorus, yeah, you'll find 500 pelian in one single pool of the river. It's a huge transformation. Yeah? Okay. So what I'm trying to say, the point I'm trying to say is, it is not rocket science. Yeah, you don't need a scientist to actually revive the river. You only need commitment. Yeah, and the commitment comes from simple villages. Yeah, simple villages. Okay, one of the first that implemented this Tagal system. By the way, Tagal is a term from the Kadazan Dusun language. Tagal means tegah in Malay, which is forbidden. Yeah, there are certain things that are forbidden to be done in the river. Okay, so Tagal. So they set up a Tagal committee in Puerto Rico. This is in Kulu, yeah, and they were smart. They may not be educated, but they were smart. There are many fish hunters in the village. Yeah, those who like to catch fish. Yeah, whether it's legal or not. Yeah, so they pulled these former fish hunters to be involved in the Tagal. Yeah, so you know this term, they're saying about it takes a thief to catch a thief. Yeah, so when you pull in the fish hunters, they are responsible for running the Tagal. So they know the tricks of the other fish hunters. Yeah, so nobody catches the fish. Yeah. They develop rules and procedures to align to their Kadazan Dusun tribal laws, yeah, which is good. Yeah. However, they learn from experience and they improve the rules over time. One of the rules that I saw in firsthand is this thing called sogit. Sogit is where you are imposed penalty for wrongdoings. Yeah, there's a sogit for divorcing somebody. There's a sogit for everything. So this is talking about sogit for wrongdoings that harm the river and the fishes. If you steal fish, which means you catch fish illegally, yeah, they will penalize you with a sogit. I remember the first time I went there to have a look at the Tagal. So I asked them, so what's the penalty for stealing fish? They said the sogit is 1 wild boar. Yeah. Then I said to them, no, I can't pay that because I'm a Muslim. Wild boar is not halal. They laugh and they say, okay, you don't have to pay me, pay us with a wild boar, but pay us 600 ringgit. So that's the equivalent, that's the value of a wild boar. Yeah. However, they learn over time that that kind of penalty may not be enough for certain people. Nowadays in the river in Puerto Rico, their sogit for stealing fish is now 1 buffalo, which is a lot bigger than a wild boar, and the value is more than 3,000 ringgit. So less and less people will be willing to steal the fish. Okay. There's also a sogit penalty for polluting the river. If you're a farmer there and you use chemicals for agriculture, and they found evidence that what you have used, yeah, has gone into the river and killed the fish, you are also imposed penalty. So they are smart. It's not just about the river. Conserving the river is about conserving the water basin. Yeah, the river basin, the whole basin. Yeah. So you have to protect the whole basin. Sorry, even for those Tagal villages that allow sport fishermen to come and catch fish. Yeah, if it's usually on the basis of catch and release. Yeah, you catch a fish, you release it. Yeah, but in the act of sport fishing, if a fish is inadvertently killed or died, yeah, you are imposed a sogit as well, 100 ringgit for each dead fish. Yeah, so you see they have developed these rules over time, over decades actually. Yeah? Okay, I mentioned the sogit already. Yeah, the riverbanks, they consider the riverbank as the buffer zone. Yeah. You may see the river flowing through the village, yeah, but on each bank, yeah, they have left the vegetation on its own because they understand that one, they want to reduce the siltation that goes into the river. So if you have the river banks, the buffer zone along both sides of the river protected as natural as possible, so there will be less siltation and even less pollution. And they also understand that the fish in the river are dependent on the insects by the rivers. Yeah, fish eats insects and nymphs and all that. If you cut the vegetation on both sides of the river, there will not be any more insects. Yeah, remember what I told you about the food pyramid. Yeah, and they have members of the Tagal program who take turns to patrol the river. And recently, youths are also trained to be proper fishing guides for visiting fishermen. Yeah, they are not quite professional fishing guides, but they are trained already. Yeah, so that helps. You have guides that understand the needs of the sport fishermen. Okay, this is a typical Tagal. In a typical village in Kulu, the Tagal is broken up into 3 zones: a red zone, a yellow zone, and a green zone. Essentially, a red zone is where nobody touches the fish. This is where they consider it the fish factory. Yeah, this is where the fish breed, yeah, and multiply. Yeah, nobody touches it. Yeah, the yellow zone is where nobody can touch it, except when the Tagal committee selects the stretch of the river for a fish harvest. Usually it's done once a year or once in 2 years. Yeah, and not all of the yellow zone will be open for fish harvesting. They will select just one pool out of, say, 4 or 5 pools. You know, so they make sure that the fish population will be revived every year. Yeah, once a pool is harvested, fishes from the other adjoining pools will come and occupy that pool. Okay, and in the Tagal system, not everybody in the village are members of the Tagal. Basically, to be a member of the Tagal, you pay a nominal sum, probably around 10 ringgit or so, yeah, a year, yeah, which is not much, yeah. But there are also others who do not want to be members, so they will have the Tagal committee knows that they have to cater for these people as well. So there is a green zone where anybody from the village can go and catch fish at any time of the day or night, yeah. But usually, I've been there. Green zones have very little fish. Because the fish are smart as well. The fish travel up to the yellow zone and red zone. Yeah. But that's to cater for those hard-headed guys who do not care about the Tagal system. Man. Okay. All right. So, like I mentioned, periodically they have a fish harvest. Yeah. They select one particular pool and they harvest. And this is a success. One pool can have between 1 to 2 tons of fish. Yeah. Is that successful? Yeah. You are talking about thousands of fishes. Yeah. That's a real life picture there. The results of one fish harvest, yeah, from one pool. Yeah. The Kulu Valley is dominated by this river called the Tuaran River. Yeah. And in the villages along it have their own Tagals. Yeah. So typically in the Tuaran River, they have 2 sections. One, the harvesting of the normal fishes like the pelian, the sebarau, yeah, and others. Yeah, usually they use casting nets or trammel nets. Yeah, but they also have one special session where they harvest this particular fish called the sisilok. The sisilok is actually an eel. I believe the proper English term is short fin eel. Yeah, in Malay it's called ikan tuna. Yeah, which is a very big version of the balloon. The biggest fish ever landed was about 20 kilos, which is pretty big. Yeah, but there are also reports of fishes that go beyond 30 kilos, huge eels. Yeah, and the way they harvest it is the young guys will dive into the pool, and these fish are hiding in between the rocks. Yeah, in the holes in the rocks, and they'll be diving and they'll be harpooning the fish. Yeah. So it's an event on itself. Yeah. So this shows how successful a Tagal system is to be able to catch up to 2 tons of fish from just one pool. Yeah, that's how healthy the river is. Yeah. Okay. When we talk about Kulu, the real success of Kulu in terms of expanding the Tagal to be economically valuable for the community, I have to talk about this young man by the name of Rushdie Lucy, or people call him Rudy for short. Yeah, he's a game changer in this valley. I've visited him quite a few times over the last several years. Yeah, he's a guy he's a master mechanic, but gave up on that profession, went back to the village and decided to do something for his own community. He is now a fishing guide. He spent years going from one village to another, convincing the Tagal communities to open up their rivers, at least the yellow and red zones, for sport fishing. Yeah, it took him years. Yeah, but now he has managed to convince 18 villages, 18 Tagals. They are now open for sport fishing. Somebody like me, who's a sport fisherman, when I go there, I will have to pay a daily fishing fee of between 80 ringgit to 160 ringgit. And that money doesn't go to him, but goes to the village. Goes to the village. And these villagers have been collecting all this money, and it has been improving the village a lot. One particular village, I can tell you, after years of collecting this fishing fees, yeah, they opened up a provision shop for the village, so that the villagers don't have to travel that long distance to town to buy provisions and all that. You know, very heartening news for me. Yeah, and a guide is assigned for the visiting fishermen to ensure that the fishing is ethical. Make sure you don't kill the fish. And then they also have chalets and homestays for fishermen to stay, and food is available nearby at the two towns of Taparoli and Kulu. What I'm trying to say here is this: from just a Tagal, where villagers try to conserve the river, it has now become an income earner. Yeah, it's commercially beneficial for the community. Yeah. Okay. What does it take to make a successful Tagal? I think it needs to start with the need to believe. Yeah, the need to believe. If we want to start a Tagal, the people in the community needs to believe that it can succeed. Yeah, so it's a game about convincing the elders. Yeah? The elders in the Tagal, especially the Ketua Kampung, the head of the village. Yeah, that this thing is a viable thing to do and a beneficial thing to do. Yeah. I suppose now with technology, we can use videos, we can use pictures and all that, and PowerPoint presentations like this. Yeah, but 2 decades ago, yeah, the people who tried to promote the Tagal had to literally bring the headman of the village to go to another village that's implementing the Tagal. Yeah, actual visit, see, experience for themselves. Yeah, when they see 500 Masir, yeah, in one pool. Yeah, thronging around in one pool, they will believe. Yeah, because that's what I felt when I went there. Yeah, and then there's a need for organizing. Yeah, for organization, setting up of a Tagal committee, preferably involving the younger members, but headed by a respected elder. Yeah, for the Tagal committee. Yeah, and then getting the members, collecting some fees. Yeah. It doesn't take much money to run a Tagal, yeah, but you still need some money, at least to buy pellets and stuff like that. Yeah? And then demarcating and reinforcing the zones, yeah, setting the rules, yeah, and then patrolling and all that. But that's for Sabah, yeah. But if we want to implement Tagal in Peninsular Malaysia, the game is slightly different, yeah. We do not have tribal laws that the village can resort to. You know, you remember that Sogit thing that I mentioned to you, yeah? So if we want to implement a Tagal in Peninsular Malaysia, my hunch is this: we probably need some strong patronage or sponsorship, especially patronage, yeah? If you can imagine, let's say we want to implement a Tagal, let's say in the state of Kelantan, yeah? We make our way to the palace of the Sultan and let the Sultan or somebody close to him to be the patron for the Tagal program. That will work, yeah, that will work, yeah? That will deter, you know, the other influential parties from coming and actually taking the fish, literally. Yeah. And if we get sponsorship and patronage from the government, especially fisheries department and bodies like that, it will be even better. Yeah. And then, of course, there are other supporting organizations, yeah, NGOs, schools, and whatnot. A school can be a supporting organization for a village Tagal. Yeah. In the case of one particular school in Sabah that I saw, yeah, a school itself implemented a Tagal because there was a river flowing up behind it, yeah, which was great. Yeah, that's direct involvement of the students in the Tagal. Tagal is truly a win-win-win proposition. I call it a win-win-win because the community wins. Yeah, they get a clean river, or lots of fish. They can get to harvest the fish. Tourist attraction, there's more money, income from sport fishermen and all that. The government wins because the government literally does not have to spend anything on conservation of the river. Yeah. And improve local and international tourism. By the way, the Tagals in Kulu, I've become a fishing guide as well. I bring international anglers to go and fish the Tagals in Sabah. And each and every one of them have come back fascinated, not just by the river, not just by the fish, but by the community and by this young man by the name of Rushdie Lucy. Yeah. And the fish and the river wins, yeah, because they can prosper. Okay. So if the Kadazan Dusun in Sabah, in Kulu, can do it, here's the big question: why can't we in Peninsular Malaysia? Yeah, we should have. By the way, in Sabah, current status is there are 500 over Tagals in Sabah. That's 500 tourist destinations. Yeah, that's a lot of Tagals. Yeah, and in Peninsula itself, there is not a single program that I would call a Tagal at the moment, where a community is really involved in. Yeah, successful one. Yeah, but if the Kadazan Dusun people can do it, why can't we? That's the question that I will leave with you. Yeah, if you want my presentation, just email me. Yeah, it's written down there, asne107@gmail.com. I will gladly share it with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Azne, for that Tagal. I counted 99 Tagals that you mentioned just now, short of 100. And wow, they harvested 2 tons of fish. That's huge, that's big. And the size of fish also huge and big. And that shows the essence of how important are the rivers. And what attracts are the fact that the local communities self-impose the regulation, the laws on that community, and everyone abide by that laws and regulations. So if we have Tagal in Sabah, how about in Peninsular Malaysia? Possibly Datuk Usam would like to touch on this. Can we have a Tagal or something?
Okay, Assalamualaikum. It is a prayer time now. And furthermore, I have another live program after. So I take a very quick talk. As a Muslim, we read Al-Quran, the holy book from our Creator, and there is 57 verses directly mention about river. Either a small river or streams up to the big river, which we cannot see the other side of the riverbank. And from these verses, it is about physical river, how river begin and originate, and also beside what's called scientific aspect of the river. It also talk about artistic side of the river from the Quran. So suppose as a Muslim, we should be a role model, how we appreciate rivers and how we conserve rivers. So river in our country should be the most clean river in the world, should be the less polluted in the world, should be rich with any kind of fish and freshwater prawns, and other living things, and the river habitat itself. But sadly, we cannot be a role model. Although we read Al-Quran, we read Prophet saying, we destroy the river. We make the river polluted. And yet we see we are best kind of civilization and human being, but yet we cannot prove it to the world. So as a Muslim, we should feel shameful. We should go back to Quran and Hadith, how to protect the river, as the saying of the prophets, as what's so called portrayed by Al-Quran. The river is so clean, the river is so pure, the river is so useful, the river is rich with protein and foods for us. And the flow of the river, as mentioned by Mr. Steve, is a magic. So this is a sign of creation by Creator. We should appreciate it, and hopefully through this webinar and continuous efforts, the teachers can educate their students. Their students can be what's so called a new generation with the new inspiration, and they will bring further conservation and appreciation in future. Thank you very much for the organizer and the panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Usam, for the brief but very meaningful perspective. Yeah, from the Islamic perspective, how important is the river and what it means to the mankind. And we should be the best of all ummah in terms of presenting our practices that is required by the teachings of Islam. Thank you, Dato'. Then over to Mr. Steve Lockett for him to present and round up this webinar. Please, over to you, Mr. Steve Lockett.
So I make my excuse first.
Okay, Dato', thank you very much. I know you are having another event coming soon. We hope to see you again.
Yes, apologies. I was expecting Asnia to go next, so I've not completed my presentation.
In case we allow Asne to overtake Steve Lockett.
If that's okay, that would be very useful.
All right, good. We always on.
If you're ready, Asne.
They are pulling rank again. Okay. Hi. Can you see my PowerPoint? Just checking.
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. I suppose it's getting late in the day, so I'll have to speed up on this one. Yeah. Okay. The topic is the river cleanup. Something that my association has been doing for the last 15 years, I would say. Yeah. And it has been very successful in changing people's mindsets towards the river. Yeah. This presentation actually serves as a manual for me. Whenever people ask me about river cleanup, I will give this manual. So with this particular PowerPoint, you can actually implement a river cleanup on your own. Yeah. Okay. Objectives of a typical river cleanup program is to clean a selected public river of its rubbish and pollution. Okay, we're not talking about a river like Klang River that flows through the heart of KL. No, we're talking about a river that the public uses. Typically, it would be a picnic river where people go there to picnic, yeah, and bathe in the river, that kind of thing. Yeah, the intent is not just to clean the river, but also to role model the act of cleaning the river. Yeah, so that's the intent. Yeah, so that we can instill the awareness and commitment among the public who are there at the river. Yeah, it's also a good way to create a wholesome family-based activity. Yeah, whilst contributing to the environment and the nation. Yeah, okay. So benefits of this river cleanup program, yeah, is multifold. Yeah, the public get to enjoy a clean river once you clean it. Yeah, local authorities would love you because there's better awareness among the visitors to the river, resulting in less rubbish and pollution. So there's less work for the Majlis Daerah, which is the local authority. Yeah. Sometimes we work with sponsors, yeah, corporate sector, and they see it as an opportunity for them to get involved in environment-linked activities. So it's good for their branding and corporate image, their CSR. Yeah. Okay. For us in Kagum, we're able to achieve some of the objectives of our river and fish conservation programs. Yeah. Okay. Of course, the environment. Yeah. More community awareness, less pollution, less rubbish. Yeah. And also tourism industry. Yeah. Because if the rivers are clean and pretty, yeah, it serves as better attraction for tourists. Yeah. So the river cleanup program, or RCU for short, has proven to be very effective for this. Yeah. First and foremost, the typical RCU has very little pomp and ceremony. We don't use loudspeakers. We don't use big banners. We don't call VIPs to make speeches and all that. It's just a bunch of normal people, yeah, going down to the picnic river and just picking up the rubbish. That's it. So we find that this convinces the public that the group is serious. Excuse me, serious in what it does. It is not just for show. Yeah? And it also creates spontaneous volunteerism among the public. Yeah. They are motivated by our group behavior. Yeah. Especially that when they learn that we sometimes come from far away. Our group sometimes travel all the way to Terengganu, Pahang, Penang, Perak, yeah, to do this river cleanup. Excuse me. Yeah. What I notice is that it is when we do a river cleanup, usually it's the children who start following us and picking up the rubbish. Yeah. They see it as a fun activity, of course. Yeah. And thus the children serve as role models for their parents. You get what I'm trying to say? That was my earlier point, that the children or the students can be the leaders. They serve as role models for the rest of the nation. Okay, target rivers. There are many rivers in Malaysia. There's hundreds and hundreds of rivers. Yeah, I once went around the country on a motorbike, fishing, of course. I counted along in my journey for over a month. I counted easily about 400 rivers, which means I crossed 400 rivers. That's a lot of rivers in the country. Yeah. But the ones that we target, streams or rivers, they are classified as hutan lipur or picnic rivers. Yeah, where the public can come and enjoy water-based activities. Yeah, picnics especially. Yeah. So there's also another one where rivers and streams flow through villages. Yeah. So we can do the gotong royong type of river cleanup in these villages. Yeah. There are also rivers in gazetted areas like Taman Negara, yeah, where rubbish pollution is also evident, yeah, in the national parks. Yeah. So these are some of the target areas, but the main one is the first bullet, yeah, the picnic rivers, because that's where a lot of the public are there, yeah, and we can model this behavior. Yeah. So these are some of the rivers. Definitely, this list is not exhaustive. But these are some of the rivers that we have done activities before. Yeah, I'm sure whichever state you come from, you can easily name many others. Yeah, that can be used for river cleanup. Okay. More importantly, the knowledge, skills, and mindset that is required when we conduct a river cleanup. Yeah, we need to know the river before we do a cleanup program. Yeah, there are risks in rivers. Yeah, and we must we must remember people who are involved in the river cleanup, especially the newcomers, they are not familiar with the risks in the river. There are slippery rocks, there are steep slopes, can be fast currents, and mainly in Malaysia, especially in Malaysia, there is also the danger or the risk of flash floods, especially during the rainy season. Yeah, so these are things that we need to look out for. Sometimes where we are doing the cleanup, yeah, it's not raining, but it may be raining heavily upstream, and the flash flood can come without notice. So usually during a river cleanup, if I were to conduct, I would be doing a briefing before we actually do the cleanup itself about the danger of things like flash floods. Yeah? For example, if you start seeing leaves and muddy suds coming down the river, you know that a flood may be coming down, so you get out of the river quick. Okay, I will bypass some of this. Yeah, most important, I think, is the mindset. When you are doing a river cleanup, we need to respect the public. Yeah, be as courteous as we can to them, give them the salam or good morning. Yeah, do not be condescending. Do not behave as if you know better. Yeah, smile at all times. Yeah, always watch out for the kids. They can be easily overzealous and get distracted. Yeah, most important, whatever happens, we have fun. Yeah, these are some of the things that you need to do in planning cleanup. I won't go into the details. Yeah, so there are things that you need to do a month before, a week before, stuff like that. Yeah, these are just details basically. Yeah, I shortcut all them. So a typical river cleanup outing, usually we do it in the morning for a couple of simple reasons. Number one, usually it rains in the afternoon, so it's better to do it in the morning. Yeah. And the more important reason is when you do it in the morning, you time it such that at the end of the cleanup, you have a nice lunch or a nice picnic by the river. So that closes everything up. Yeah. So these are the things that that we propose to do during the cleanup day itself. Yeah, briefing, and sometimes I play what do you call it, energizer games as well before the cleanup. Yeah, games that relate to learnings on environment management. Yeah, and then briefing on the challenges that are expected. Yeah, sometimes something simple. We give the members dustbin liners and rubber gloves. Yeah, for the simple reason that there are some rubbish items that you wouldn't want to pick up with your bare hands. Imagine diapers. Yeah, the favorite cleanup item is diapers. You find lots and lots of diapers. Yeah, it's amazing. In a typical picnic river, which is how do you call it, managed by, say, the local district council, you have dustbins by the side of the river, but nobody uses the dustbins. They throw the diapers behind the trees, in between rocks, you know, those kind of places. Yeah, so you need to pick up the diapers. So you imagine a 1 month old diaper, which is already soggy because of the rains. Yeah, you wouldn't pick it up with your bare hands. That's why we supply rubber gloves there. Okay. Even simple things like we had to instruct, when you want to do the cleanup, go to the furthest end of the river stretch, then you pick up the rubbish and come back towards base. Yeah, in that way, you won't be burdened with such a heavy bag, as it were. Those simple things we'll do the briefing. Yeah. Like I said, we come back to base and then we have a picnic lunch. But before that lunch, we have a debriefing session. How the members of the cleanup group experience the whole session, what happened to them vis-a-vis them and the public. Yeah, some of those experiences are great. where there's opportunity, we also have simple competition. Simple competition. Who can pick up the most rubbish? Yeah, we actually have a weighing scale and weigh the rubbish. Yeah, and who also can find the most unique item of rubbish? Yeah, most unique item of rubbish. I will expound on that a little bit later. This is the briefing sessions. Yeah. Okay. Right. How to handle the public? Like I said, go about your business quietly and with a smile. Yeah. Be courteous. If you are entering or intruding on their personal space, just say, excuse me, or tumpang lalu ya. Very simple thing. Yeah. My favorite is to excuse myself and actually pick rubbish right in front of them. Chances are the rubbish that I pick are the very rubbish item that they just threw a few minutes before. That's very, very telling. Yeah. Focus on collecting rubbish lying close to the person. Like I said, yeah. Smile and greet them. Be courteous at all times. We are not there to pick a fight, yeah, but we are there to role model something in the hope that they will change their behavior. Yeah. Okay. Some of the frequently asked questions when we do the river cleanup. What are you doing? Yeah. Why are you doing this? The simple answer is we are trying to clean the river. It feels better when the river is clean, that you can have a nice picnic. Yeah. And then they might say, hey, the district council is handling the rubbish. Right? I know, maybe they are overworked because there's still too much rubbish. Yeah. So we decided to volunteer and help. Yeah. Are you part of a campaign or something? No. It's just a group of us who decided to get together and do this. We've been doing this, every month or so for the last few years. Why do you come from so far away just to collect rubbish? We are part of a large group from all over the country. Yeah. We're just trying to do our part to conserve the rivers. That kind of conversation. Yeah. Okay. This particular site shows the attire and the kind of tools that you need. Yeah. It's all pretty simple. Yeah. All pretty straightforward. Yeah. Based on simple logic. Yeah. It doesn't take much to conduct a river cleanup. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't take much. Yeah, very simple things. Okay. Of course, for the team leaders, they might need a few extra items. First aid kit, just in case something happens. Yeah. Extra bin liners and latex gloves. Yeah. There are some groups who even try to procure biodegradable bin liners. When you put rubbish in the bin liners and you bring it to the council dump or whatever, yeah. If you have biodegradable ones, they will degrade. Yeah, so they go to that extent. Yeah, and maybe some ground sheet for picnic lunch. Yeah, not mineral water, but water in bottles. We used to bring mineral water bottles, but we have stopped. But now we prefer to bring aluminum bottles or those kind of bottles, not mineral water bottles. By the way, just to share with you, I got this from somewhere. Every day throughout the world, 68 million mineral water bottles are discarded and not recycled. Let me repeat, 68 million mineral water bottles. The way I describe it during my briefing for the river cleanup, I would say this. If you imagine every day there are enough bottles that are thrown into the drains and whatnot, enough 68 million is like you can fill up the whole of KLCC. Yeah, the whole of KLCC, Petronas Twin Towers. Yeah, so over a year there would be 365 Petronas Twin Towers worth of mineral water bottles. Then that will impress them. There's a lot of mineral water bottles. So we stopped using mineral water bottles now. Okay. Being on a picnic river is good fun, but we have to be aware of the potential dangers. I think I've alluded to that. Yeah, slippery rocks and all that. Keep a lookout for kids. We have done a couple of river cleanups involving school kids. I noticed a few things. Kids have a short attention span. Yeah, so if you don't keep their attention, yeah, they will start wandering and doing something else. Yeah, so during the cleanup itself, you have to be on the lookout because in the act of having fun, sometimes accidents may happen. Yeah, so you need to have enough people or enough adults to supervise, depending on the age of the kids. Yeah. Okay, secrets of success. first and foremost, have lunch. We usually try to have some kind of potluck or catered picnic at the end of the river cleanup. Yeah, we need to communicate well before the event. Yeah. Here's one thing: be very clear of your rendezvous point. I think nowadays it's a little bit easier because we got Google Map and Waze and all that. Yeah. A few years ago, we always have cases of people getting lost trying to find where we are conducting the river cleanup. Yeah, trying to find a venue. But now it's much easier. Yeah, do a good briefing on site and a good debriefing at the end of the cleanup. Yeah, ensure that leaders are constantly observe the behavior of the volunteers. If possible, organize into smaller groups or pairs for safety. Yeah, and then not to forget to thank everyone at the end of the day. Yeah. And then on the next day, send out emails or WhatsApp messages to all the volunteers. Yeah, so this reinforces their sense of achievement, so that when you call for another river cleanup, they will willingly come. Yeah. Okay, whatever we do, have fun. When we started the first river cleanup, there were only 5 of us. Yeah, including me. Yeah. The pinnacle of this river cleanup program was when we conducted a national river cleanup. Yeah. Where on the same Sunday, yeah, there was a river cleanup group in every state, yeah, collecting rubbish from their selected picnic rivers. Yeah, we feel it's fun, and we feel that it can bring a big impact to the country's rivers. And I believe getting students involved in this kind of program is not difficult. Yeah, it's far easier to do a river cleanup than to set out a tagal, that's for sure. Yeah, and it's fun for the kids, and it's good learning as well. And if we marry the river cleanup with some kind of river appreciation program, where, like Claire mentioned or showed in her presentation, where students get involved in sampling of the river's aquatic health, you know, sampling the nymphs and all that. Yeah, you combine the two together, it will even be greater fun. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Azne Malik, for the awesome presentation. Saya merasa kagum dengan presentation Cik Azne. Yeah. For the benefit of Steve and Claire, kagum means I feel amazed by his presentation. And he has actually highlighted when it comes to river cleaning, we think about river cleaning, we feel about river cleaning, we talk about river cleaning, and we do something about river cleaning. So the cycle of thinking, feeling, saying, and doing about river cleaning is an effective way of saying to this river that we love you. Yeah, thank you, Azne. And I would like to invite up and say what next after the webinar. Is it after the webinar we just stop here and then we go home, we clap our hands, or are we going something, or are we doing something more for the better of all of the teacher out there? What is the way forward, Steve? Please.
Thank you, Terima kasih. And I'd like to just refer back briefly to everything that has gone on in this session. Some of the things I will refer to directly during my next presentation, but particularly to mention some of the things that Aznia has shown us today, and with regard to my experience and my interest, which is about the Marsia Range countries. So I've visited many of the Tagal sites. I've also spoken to people in other countries. So in Thailand, they have similar systems of community protection of the rivers. And in Indonesia, particularly in Sumatra, they have a similar system there, which is almost identical to Tagal. And in India and Nepal, you have a system of fish sanctuaries, which can be legally notified and is often done around Hindu temples in particular. So this is something which is common. And I would also say there is a huge interest in river cleanup, especially community river cleanup. Clearly, there are things which should happen from the top down, government should legislate to stop industrial pollution. And in most cases they do, however, enforcement may not always be appropriate. But equally, communities can take things into their own hands, and as Neil has been making the case, if kids understand the importance of not simply discarding things and not using the river as a garbage disposal unit, then this starts to pass to the adults in a far more effective manner. So it's important that we don't just say, oh, government can do that, that people take personal responsibility, but equally that we do have the government protection in place. And to then come back to education, so I'll share what's been happening. Clearly, because of the technical issues earlier, not as much activity on the Mentimeter as I would expect, but I've also been busy behind the scenes trying to encourage people on Twitter and Facebook. So other people have been sharing words on the social media. And from my perspective as a teacher, but also as a journalist, I would say the use of words is very important. And this is where in education, those working in science and possibly technology, engineering, mathematics, that you may want to consider the appropriate use of words by yourself when you're delivering lessons, but also amongst the students. So from a journalistic point of view, we try wherever possible to not repeat words unless it is hugely important that that word is repeated to make a point. And if we look at this little map of some of the words which have been dropped on here, the largest one, the one more people have entered into Mentimeter than others, is life. But we can also look at words like somebody dropped on Twitter, vivifying, which has its roots in the word life. Its meaning is life-giving. So by understanding this connection, we can use the power of words within our own teaching and find more interesting ways of representing what it is we're trying to say. So this may be a biology teacher talking about life from within a river or associated with a river, but you don't always have to use the word life. You can use life. Then you can use vivifying. And also here, if you can see, we have vitality and we have ebullient. So these are all words which are interconnected, related, and allow us to expand the palette with which we're passing on the education. I mentioned that life is the central one, the largest one in all of this, but some of the words also have other connotations within them. So we have forgiving. And if we link forgiving with the one at the bottom, culturally rich, and this takes us back to the beginning when I spoke about my friend Parinita, her words on a webinar on rivers as sacred spaces, and we have touched on religion, and I will touch on religion again shortly. That although as STEM teachers, we will constantly be looking at formula, at data, but equally the idea, and in fact the whole thing about ideas, the whole idea of feelings and emotions is something which can add an extra layer of depth to what we're teaching. And it adds meaning personally. So people are more inclined to understand or take on complex theories if we involve the emotions in what we're doing. And there are huge cultural significances in respecting and looking after rivers, fresh water as a whole, and the biodiversity that's associated with them. So we have forgiving in there with the culturally rich. And of course, as engineers, we need to look at flow. We need to look at connections. We need to look at energy, words which have been dropped here. And cleanser is an interesting one. So we're talking about do not use rivers as a disposal unit. However, they are cleansing. And to a large extent, rivers can rehabilitate. As Nia mentioned, the fish stocks rehabilitating, but the qualities of water themselves can rehabilitate them if we start to treat them with a bit of respect. And I learned this very early on when I took a friend who is one of the world's leading ecosystem services experts. And we looked at a black river emerging from a village, which, I say river, it was actually a tiny stream, probably not much more than a hand's width. But within 200 or 300 meters of moving from the village, the water was clear again, because there are microbes in the soil, and as it passes through vegetation, and as the sunlight acts on the river, they all help the river to clean. So cleanser is an interesting choice of words in there. But I'll go back to the one I love, ebullient. What a fantastic word for rivers. So I'll move on. For some reason, there we go. I pressed the wrong button. We're on to it now. I spoke earlier about how freshwater ecosystems and associated biodiversity is under the greatest threat. But this diagram from the Living Planet report I mentioned earlier offers a way ahead. And as teachers and educators, our role is to also find ways to shape the future. Now, that's not to say, I mean, we can look at this map and look at the red curve and think, well, freshwater ecosystems face a hopeless case. But if we all work together, then we can stabilize things. And if we work together to stabilize things, then as we've suggested, the rivers and their inhabitants can take over and can help themselves. But for all of these reasons, that's why we as teachers and educators have to understand that we are powerful voices for change. Sorry for that, skipping a slide. You will probably recognise Peninsular Malaysia here, and the outlook for Malaysia under the expected impacts from climate change models may not be as bleak as in some of the other countries, particularly Marsia Range countries around the region. But what can you expect in Malaysia? Well, increasing floods because rainfall will be of unexpected intensity. And this gives associated implications for agriculture, industry, and as we've seen, and very importantly, impacts on housing, how people live their lives. I would also say that even in the short time that I've been visiting Kuala Lumpur, which is approximately 12 to 13 years, I think I can see the effects of, or the changes to what's called the heat island effect, where concretization and increasing development means that the sun's rays are captured in the landscape in a way they previously were not. This is the heat island effect, which means that the city is far, far hotter than the landscape surrounding it. And this adds to the changes that we see under climate change, or what is rightly called the climate crisis. And when I first visited Sabah, which was August 2014, specifically to go and look at some of the Tagal sites, people there said to me, "Why are you coming in the rainy season?" And the next time I went back was in January 2019, and the rain was far worse then than when I visited in August. And in fact, in January, almost every river I visited was flooded from mid-afternoon every day through the whole of my 2-week stay. And I'll talk a little bit about Jakarta, because there will be people from Indonesia who are interested in the whole of this presentation we've been giving. And Jakarta is often cited as an example of how climate change is going to wreak havoc, to the extent that Indonesia is planning a whole new capital city in Kalimantan on the island of Borneo. Yet actually most of the problems for Jakarta have been caused because of a lack of sympathy for the connections between water and landscape. So we have to hope that the Indonesian government are using scientists, technologists, and engineers who have an understanding of the kind that we've been presenting this evening. Because if not, the new capital is almost certain to fall victim to similar issues of flooding and subsidence. But of course, being in the centre of Borneo, they probably won't disappear beneath the waves, which is the likely future for Jakarta. All of these things that we've been talking about, they all need people with an understanding of freshwater ecosystems and the geological, chemical, physical, and biological processes that bind them. To create sustainable development within countries, we need people who know how human impacts alter and shape these processes, both for good and for bad. Our ancestors understood how to live with natural phenomena. If you look at traditional knowledge systems, where groups such as Orang Asli have an intrinsic understanding of how to shape their lives around natural rhythms and cycles in such a way that ecosystems and biodiversity work for them, and they do not overexploit them. But yes, of course, forests, rivers and wildlife are less able to provide at the scale of modern life compared to the scale of a tribal community. But that's where we, understanding the issues faced by humanity, hold the solution in our hands. By taking, appreciating and acknowledging the gifts provided by nature and the models from our forebears, we can bring modern technology, engineering and problem solving into the battle. Because we have to face it, we are in a battle to find ways to live more sustainably. Once we've used up all of the planet's natural resources, we humans will struggle to survive. As the saying goes, you cannot eat, drink or breathe money. By employing quality education, we can expect the students of today to be better able to plan our cities in such a way that floods are less likely. For instance, they may employ permeable paving in cities so that heavy rain can recharge groundwater instead of running off hard into channelized rivers, so that what is currently a heat island will be slightly cooler due to low-level greening of pedestrianised spaces and even urban roads. And the current huge levels of mining river sands, which causes floods to be more destructive and stops fish, crocodiles and birds from being able to breed, may not be needed for the insatiable construction we're currently under. And if we train those students, we can prepare then farmers and those who depend upon rivers for their livelihoods to be able to adapt to the unpredictable weather patterns. We can train the farmers to use water-efficient sprinkling systems on crops which are better suited to overwet or excessively dry growing conditions. And I'm sure as you look at this slide, you'll probably spot other ways in which the understanding of freshwater ecosystems and associated biodiversity can be used. And these are all potential career pathways for anybody who understands freshwater ecosystems and biodiversity. I'm going to take a couple of minutes on things which help Marcia Trust. So everything we do, we are completely voluntary. All of the people who are involved have given their time freely to prepare these things, to do these things, and to go out and help people understand their rivers and their fish. So we have this river modelling table in India, and if anybody is watching and you're interested, then perhaps if you would like to buy one, if a school would like to buy one in Malaysia, or perhaps a consortium of schools or a local state authority would like to buy one, then please don't be afraid to contact me and ask for advice. I can put you in touch with the people who do it. The cost to have a river modelling table in Malaysia would be approximately $10,000. And Claire and I would both be happy to help you with training people to use it or for the logistics of getting it to you in Malaysia. And we have one currently in India, in southern India, and we have a project running where we need $20,000 to make this mobile, because previously all of the people who have had access to this, all of the students who have had access, have been privileged. They're going to good schools. And we would like to take this into villages, into Adivasi, which is the Indian equivalent of Orang Asli, into those tribal communities, so that people there can get the benefit of some hands-on education, instead of, as happened when we ran an art component to go alongside the river modelling. In one village in Tamil Nadu, the tribal kids were told, something special's happening today, you don't need to come to school. And I only found this out when the educator who was working on my behalf sent in the final report at the end of her talk. And that made me I was going to say sad, but actually quite angry that these people who understand the river in ways we don't understand the river were excluded from taking part in an interesting activity, which they may find fascinating and otherwise they don't get the opportunity. So if there's anybody watching from the Malay Tamil community who have contacts in Tamil Nadu and can help us raise the $20,000 we need to mount our river modelling table permanently in the back of a minibus. And let me also say that $20,000 would also employ a local education officer for 1 year to operate the river modelling table on our behalf. So we're looking at ways to do that. You see shortly details of how to contact Marcia Trust. Visit the website. You can see all of our contact details there, or just drop Steve at, and you'll get to me on that route via email. One thing we have coming up shortly is we're going to run on our Instagram platform a thing called #MarciaMonday Q&A. We've just recruited a communications officer who will be asking a question every week to an expert in the field. So if you'd like to take part, I would like another Menti question. The login you can see is there. I'll keep the login live for the next 24 hours. So through, let's say through the whole of Saturday. And you can choose which of these 3 questions you would like to see answered by an expert. And the first one will probably raise some eyebrows because you can see the pictures of 2 Marcia here on the screen. And both of these in Malaysia would be referred to as Malay Marcia. And likewise, in Thailand, they would be referred to as Thai Marcia. But actually, Tortambra is from Java originally. It's an Indonesian Marcia. And Tortambroides is from Sumatra. It's an Indonesian Marcia. And quite commonly, across the whole of Malaysia and Indonesia, Tortambra will be called Ikan Kela Merah, the red Marcia. And Tortambroides will be called Ikan Kela Biru, the blue Marcia. And if we just jump back to connections as well, because Tortambroides in Sumatra is also sometimes called Ikan Putih, the white fish. And it's very common throughout most of the Marcia countries that they call Marcia white fish. For instance, where we go in South India with the river modelling table, in Kannada, the language of Karnataka, it's called Biliminu, the white fish. So we're back to those connections again. It's so important. So please enter the Menti poll and we'll get one of these questions answered by an expert. And that will be coming up on our Instagram from probably, we will start in the middle of May, I suggest. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with who we are, what we're doing, please sign up for a newsletter, info@marciatrust.org, and put the subject newsletter. You will be on the mailing list. And the newsletters go out quarterly. You won't get one every day. You won't get one every week. You won't be bombarded with spam. So that's almost it for Marcia Trust. Just one final thing. I'm putting together a webinar to explain some of those things about the Marcias of Indonesia and Malaysia specifically, and why some of these confusions have crept into the science. I'm expecting to be doing this sometime in June 2021. So please, again, check out the social media feeds so you can see when this is going live, and then you can listen to me droning on all about fish, and particularly about things like the genetics of the Marcia and establishing scientific protocols. I hope it will be interesting. So back to STEM, and just this morning I got up early, set the alarm to just check that everything I needed for today was set, was going to happen, it was all going to work perfectly. And clearly I did something that put a bit of bad luck on the whole thing when we started. However, my friend Sunita, who is a doctoral student working on freshwater otters in North India, I noticed on her Facebook timeline, she posted a picture of the stick insect she'd found when she was just setting off for some field work. and she said, "This is amazing. Look how it's moving. We should use these to teach robotics." And so I would say that this reinforces Claire's points about both being out of the accepted confines of what is a classroom, and it also demonstrates a route to learning through exploration. And by taking students into the wild, but ensuring they approach everything they see, hear, and do with an open, inquiring mind, we can both sensitize them to a new, and as we've seen, a fragile environment, and we can also allow creative thought processes to develop. So, I mean, imagine picking up a stick insect and building a machine that copies the way it moves. And maybe if you're an educator or a teacher and you've taken students into the field and you've picked up that stick insect, can you get them to copy the way the insect moves? It may look a bit bizarre and some of the kids will laugh and be embarrassed, but by doing those things, we're learning the basis of biomimicry. And we can ask, well, how is this going to help you understand mechanics? So here's my radical idea for the day. If you look at the legs and the body and the antenna of this stick insect, does the combination of the levers, which are the limbs, suggest ways perhaps in which we could build a self-operating bridge across a stream which uses the hydraulic power from the water to operate? Maybe a bit radical, maybe just the bizarre way that my mind works, but I think this is what we should be doing as teachers and allowing kids to form those mindsets. So questions are the basis. And as I often have to remind my more senior scientist colleagues, the whole of science is based on questioning what came before. So we have to put aside our personal egos and we have to allow those questions. It is the whole basis of science. It's time to conclude, and this beautiful picture on the left-hand side of the slide is the beginning of a small river called the Lakshman Theater, which is one of the tributaries of the sacred river Kaveri of South India. And I'm sure we can all understand the beauty of being on such a pristine piece of water, appreciating this piece of water. But don't forget that we need to take a moment to think about the way that that water connects us all. And as we've heard, the ritual use of water is enshrined in Islam, as mentioned in the Holy Quran. And indeed, it's a significant part of all the world's major religions, from Christianity through Judaism to Taoism, Hinduism, and Islam, as we mentioned, and beyond. And beyond that, there are multiple resolutions and international agreements signed by almost every country of the world, which taken individually, they should stop us polluting rivers, they should stop us destroying biodiversity, they should stop us threatening our own future. As a body, the UN Conventions on Discrimination Against Women, on the rights of children and the rights of people with disabilities, alongside the Sustainable Development Goals and Conventions on Biodiversity, give us all the tools we need. But it's down to us to ensure that we're aware, that we understand, and we can commit using the words, the three words that Asnir shared with us when we were planning this whole presentation: awareness, understanding, commitment. It's on us as teachers and educators to commit to using them ourselves, to encouraging our young wards, our students, to understand and commit to using them. And it's upon all of us that we protect these spaces, without which we will not survive. So I'd just like to end with a new Malay word for me, and I hope it's an appropriate word and the correct word: harapan.
Thank you, Steve. You got the word correct. Pronunciation also correct. Dialect also correct.
For anybody, any English language speakers out there, that word is hope.
Okay, thank you very much, and to the listeners out there, especially the teachers, educators, and those who are keen on the rivers and environment as a whole. We are not stopping our program here, but we are following up with the educators out there. We are reaching out to them after this webinar, especially to the schools, through the teachers, where they can be engaging with the students later on. And this, yeah, because the how and what to do has been presented by Mr. Adil Malik. And of course, we'll be in touch with Steve and also Claire on how best we can offer this to the educators and also to the students. Yeah. So I want to thank you very much, Claire, Steve, Cik Azli Malik, and Datuk Husam have already left the meeting earlier. And we hope to see you all again for our next webinar, possibly, and subject matter that is close to our hearts. So let's think, let's feel, let's do, and let's say about rivers that we are talking about today. With that, I want to thank you to all the speakers for your patience in
Sama-sama.
out there. To all our listeners out there who has been patient because of the technical hiccups that we had earlier. And these people has come back to listen. And of course, this is recorded and we have a replay if they like later. And for those who like to have those materials, they can contact Azli Malik for the materials, because these are the things that we want to impart as far as knowledge is concerned, so that it is being shared by as many people as possible, you know, so that they don't throw rubbish anymore in the river. Yeah, it's no more a dumping site or a dumping bin for them to as a simple place to put away whatever they do not like. Yeah. With that, we would like to thank you on behalf of the organizer and hope to see you again. Assalamualaikum. Good evening. Selamat tengah hari.
Okay.